The prime directives of the unconscious mind are essentially from the timeline therapy certification training. And I'd like to cover them here briefly because I think they also provide a really good presuppositional basis for NLP. They really make a big difference in our ability to do NLP and the way we think about NLP. And they've certainly helped me in terms of how do I work with clients. Now, one of the things I think that's important as we begin to talk about the prime directives of the unconscious mind, and they're on page 13, by the way. One of the things I think is really important is to realize that it's the unconscious mind that makes the changes that we make. We can talk to the conscious mind, and we can have a discussion with the conscious mind. But at the same time, we'll also be discussing with the unconscious mind those kinds of changes that we have to make. And so from time to time, we're going to need to incorporate and utilize the work of the unconscious mind. Now, whereas most of what we've done in the last two programs, number 2 and number 3, has been mostly stuff for your conscious mind, what we're talking about now is giving the conscious mind an understanding of how the unconscious mind works. And so I think we're going to shift gears slightly and talk about a part of you of which you're not conscious, which is your unconscious mind. Now let's begin by defining unconscious mind. I think that's important to do. I think I'd like to define unconscious mind as the part of your mind that you're not conscious of right now. I mean, think about that for just a minute, because until I mentioned it, you weren't conscious of the feeling of your feet against the floor, or the backs of your legs against the chair, or your back against the chair. If you're taking notes, you may not have been conscious of the pen, but certainly you're conscious of the sound of my voice. But maybe you weren't so conscious about the other noises going on. Certainly there are some other noises that are coming from the recording that we made. And certainly there may be other noises that are coming from around you. All of those things that you weren't necessarily conscious of, and certainly you weren't conscious of your eyes blinking, or your breathing, or the beating of your heart. And all of those things are things that your unconscious mind does for you. The prime directives of the unconscious mind sort of put the notion of change, in my opinion, in perspective. They put the notion of change in perspective because the fact is that when we create change, the change we create the changes that we create are going to happen at the unconscious level and in conjunction with the unconscious mind. Okay, so let's look at, by the way, some of these are circled on page 13 and 14. Some of these are circled, and I think those are the ones that are the most important prime directives of the unconscious mind. So let's see what they are. The first is that the unconscious mind stores our memories. It stores our memories in relationship to time. And it stores our memories not in relationship to time. There's a word here also that's important, and we'll talk about that issue of relationship in just a moment. The word temporal means in relationship to time, and that means our timeline. And atemporal means not in relationship to time. Usually the language that we learn, the languages that we know, are not learned, the meaning of words is not learned in relationship to time. Now, relationship is very important because it is a job of the unconscious mind to create relationships or connectedness at the unconscious level. And so that's also very important with regards to the unconscious mind storing our memories. Number 2, the unconscious mind is the domain of the emotions. It's where all the emotions live. Someone who's not really connected with their emotions may not have as good a connection with the unconscious mind as someone who is well connected with their emotions. So the unconscious mind is the part of us that feels, although certainly we are conscious of our emotions. Typically, our emotions are stored and organized and kept in the unconscious mind. Number 3, the unconscious mind organizes all of our memories. It uses the timeline, and the mechanics of that organization is the gestalt. Our memories are organized generally according to time, but they're also organized according to subject. They're also organized according to feeling, and that's what allows us to have a certain, say, chain of memories of happiness or a certain chain of memories of frustration. The unconscious mind will chain all of those together. Number 4, the unconscious mind will repress memories with unresolved negative emotions. And the metaphor of ancient Hawaiian huna, which is the ancient psychology of ancient Hawaii, said that oftentimes the unconscious mind will take a memory with unresolved negative emotions on it and put it into a little black bag and then shove it down. Well, the metaphor ended there. They didn't say where the black bag was shoved to, But if you floated above your timeline, and we certainly will before the end of this this recording, not this one, but the entire series, if you floated above your timeline and looked down on your timeline, you may have noticed that there were some dark areas or perhaps areas that looked like they were missing. And essentially those are memories with unresolved negative emotions on them, if you did notice anything like that. Number 5, the unconscious mind presents repressed memories for resolution. So it brings those memories up to make them rational and also to release the negative emotions. Because I think your unconscious mind realizes, and I think your conscious mind also realizes that the negative emotions aren't really good for us. I mean, when you feel a negative emotion, do you go, oh boy, there's that sadness again, gee, that really feels good? Probably not. Probably not. So the unconscious mind's job, number 5, is to bring up those memories for resolution. And from time to time, you may have memories that come up and you go, oh, maybe I need to think about this now. And at some point, you may have gained resolution on them. If you have gained resolution on a certain memory sometime in the past, what you probably found was that having gained resolution on it, it ceased to bother you. And by the way, that's the mechanics of how timeline therapy works. And we'll be talking about that before the end of this series. Okay, number 6, the unconscious mind does have the right to keep repressed emotions repressed for your protection. And oftentimes that's the mechanism where we don't actually remember the full content of a certain memory. Number 7, the unconscious mind runs the body. Now that's useful. It's better that the unconscious mind should do it than that we have to do it. Certainly if I had to breathe myself every day, think about that for a minute. You have to breathe in and then breathe out and then breathe in and then breathe out. And then you'd have to sit there and go, well, is it time to breathe in yet? Or you don't have to do that. The unconscious mind, everything happens automatically. You just breathe in and breathe out. Some people tell me, by the way, they say, Tad, I really don't think I can trust my unconscious mind. And I'll say to them, well, who ran your body last night while you slept? And they'll go, well, what do you mean? I'll say, well, did you sleep all right last night? They'll go, yeah, I slept fine. And I'll say, good, because who did you trust enough to allow you to sleep? And of course, that would be their unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind runs the body, and it also has a blueprint that it uses to run the body. It has a blueprint of the body now, and it also has a blueprint of perfect health. And that blueprint of perfect health is stored in an area which we call the higher self. Now, technically, if we begin to use the words higher self, we're stepping outside of the realm of NLP, and we're stepping outside of the realm of hypnosis. If you're working with someone who's particularly conservative, you might want to skip the words higher self and not use them. In which case you would say, in the deepest part of the unconscious mind, there's a blueprint of perfect health. But the fact is the unconscious mind does have access to a blueprint of perfect health, and we use that issue when we're asking the unconscious mind to begin to heal the body. Number 8, the unconscious mind preserves the body. It maintains the integrity of the body. I think other things being equal, the unconscious mind will always take as its highest job the preservation of the body. Now, sometimes unconscious minds forget about this, so then there are things like disease which crops up. But the fact is that the highest job of the unconscious mind is to preserve the body. By the way, if you want to put 2 stars next to this, I think this is probably the most important prime directive of the unconscious mind, which is to preserve the body. Number 9, the unconscious mind is a highly moral being. It accepts the morality which you've been taught and which you have accepted. You may have heard it said there's even honor among thieves, which is why everyone can have a different morality. At least number 9 says that why everyone can have a different morality is because the unconscious mind has to accept a certain morality, and either it'll accept or reject the morality that you grew up with. Number 10, the unconscious mind enjoys serving, and it needs clear orders. I think it needs really clear orders to follow. That's why, and the problem is that most people give the unconscious mind inconsistent orders. Like one day, oh, I'm so happy, I'm looking so handsome or so beautiful. You look in the mirror, and the next day you go, oh, God, I look awful. And the poor unconscious mind gets confused. Or one day, I'm a great person, the next day I'm no good. And the unconscious mind gets confused and isn't sure what it should do about that. One of the most important things we can do with regards to this prime directive, that is, the unconscious mind enjoys serving and needs clear orders to follow. One of the most important things that we can do is to give our unconscious mind consistent direction, consistent directives. Okay, let's look at page 4. The unconscious mind controls and maintains all perceptions. This is number 11, both those which are regular, whatever that means, and those which are telepathic, and it receives and transmits these perceptions to the conscious mind. Anytime we want to increase our ability to perceive, we would work with the unconscious mind. That means that you could talk to the unconscious mind and ask it to increase the perception, even in regular perception, such as vision or hearing. You can ask the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind will improve the hearing or the vision if you simply work with the unconscious mind to have it do that. Number 12, the unconscious mind is in charge of the generation, the storage, the distribution, and the transmission of energy throughout the body. So if someone comes to you and does actually want more energy or feels like they have low energy, for example, in a situation like Epstein-Barr virus, for example, someone comes to you with Epstein-Barr virus and they say, I really would like to have more energy because I have this situation, chronic fatigue syndrome. The unconscious mind can be encouraged and given the opportunity to increase the amount of energy, and the symptomology of that can certainly be reduced dramatically or even disappear. Number 13, the unconscious mind is in charge of instincts and generate habits. Those are two different things, by the way. Let's talk about instincts first. Instincts include instincts like the flight or fight response. That's an instinct. If you're threatened, what will happen is the fight or flight response will kick in and you'll choose one of those. You'll choose either fight or flight, and the unconscious mind will simply kick in, and you'll either get out of the way safe by running, by doing flight, or you'll stay there and fight and be safe. In addition, the unconscious mind is also in charge of generating habits. So a habit is, there can be good habits and there can be bad habits. And typically the unconscious mind, number 14, will need repetition until a habit is installed. Changing strategies using NLP or swish patterns oftentimes do change habits by themselves, and therefore the unconscious mind will not need that much repetition if we're using NLP to change a habit. Number 15, the unconscious mind is programmed to continually seek more and more, which means there's always more to discover. There's always more to discover. This, by the way, is a very important function in substance abuse. In a substance abuse situation where the client begins with a little bit of whatever substance it is and then begins to take more and more of it, that's because the unconscious mind generally functions by comparison, and each time it looks for a little bit more and more and more. That's also important in getting rid of substance abuse. Number 16, the unconscious mind functions best as a whole integrated unit. And that means it does not need parts to function. We talked about this under the presuppositions previously, and we said that all procedures should increase wholeness. And probably, I think from our point of view in NLP, the best thing to do is to have an integrated wholeness at the unconscious level, not fragmented into parts, but an integrated wholeness at the unconscious level, which means that parts integration, which we will be covering during this series, parts integration is really, really called for to increase that. Anytime you have a client that has incongruency, parts integration is the answer. Number 17, the unconscious mind is symbolic. It uses and responds to symbols. I'm not the first person to point this out, nor are the prime directives of the unconscious mind. Actually, the first person was Carl Jung. Now, Jung, by the way, was a heavy dude, and I really think Jung was a great writer in psychology. Becoming more and more appreciative of his work as time goes on. But anyway, I think one day Jung was sitting there and he looked at a tarot deck and he went, oh, archetypes. And so he wrote a book called Psyche and Symbol. And Jung was one of the first persons to point out that the unconscious mind thinks in symbols and uses symbols and responds to symbols. This is also important with regards to a client's personal history, if we take a personal history from a client, or if we ask client questions about the client's past. Remember that the unconscious mind, a lot of what the unconscious mind gives us may be symbolic and may actually not be the event or item which is represented. You can test this out in your own personal experience. Check this out. If you've had a brother or a sister or one of your other family members and you've both been to a major family event, ask them about their recollection of it. More than likely, it'll be totally different from your recollection of it. In fact, people get into arguments all the time. They go, no, that's not what happened. I was there. This is what happened. And I was right there. He never said that. And so the unconscious mind What you remember is simply what you remember. Usually it's a symbolic representation and not an actual representation of what really went on. Okay, number 18, the unconscious mind takes everything personally. By the way, this is the basis of perception as projection, which we talked about in our first program. The unconscious mind takes everything personally. It's almost as if, I don't know if you remember when you were a kid and you pointed your finger at somebody and they said, yeah, but what you don't know is there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. Every time you look outside yourself and you point the finger at someone else and say, that's not me, or that's that person, or so forth, your unconscious mind thinks you're thinking that of you. So the unconscious mind takes everything personally as a double-edged sword. It's actually good and bad. It's good if you can get in control of your thinking. I remember a while back, I sat in front of a guy named Swami Muktananda. I don't know if you guys remember Swami Muktananda, but I sat in front of Muktananda, and one of the seminars that I attended with Muktananda, he said, see everyone as being divine. And I thought to myself, wow, how can he say that? Does he even mean the bum on the street outside here, that this person's divine? And of course he did mean that. Well, see, it's a great meditation, because if I see that person as divine, then I see myself as divine. Now, what's really great about NLP and working with clients, whether it's in business or education or therapy, and working with clients on an everyday basis and believing that they can make a change. See, that's a magnificent meditation for you, because you look across at them and you see them changing. And then your unconscious mind begins to take that personally and could actually see that you could change. So the unconscious mind taking everything personally is a real important part of NLP. And it's really important because, just think about this. Every time you work with someone else doing an NLP procedure or a timeline therapy procedure, and they change, it also increases your belief system in yourself. It increases the belief system in yourself, and you change and they change. Now that's exciting. Number 19, the unconscious mind works on the principle of least effort. It works on the path of least resistance. The unconscious mind will do as little as it possibly can to produce the kind of results you've asked it for. So that's important, because it means we need to pin down the unconscious mind when we're asking it to make change. We'll talk specifically about that when we get into the timeline therapy segment, and also quite a bit more about that when you come to the training that you've decided to come to. The unconscious mind works on the principle of least effort, the path of least resistance. Simply means we need to get real specific with the unconscious mind so that we pin it down as to where it's going and what we want it to do. And number 20, the unconscious mind does not process negatives. Now, we talked about this earlier, but I think it bears repeating. If I say to you, don't think of a blue tree, of course you're thinking of a blue tree. So we have to be careful to suggest to our clients to make the kinds of changes we want them to make. Now, we could tell them what not to think. So, for example, I could say to you, I don't want you to think that it will be really, really easy for you to make this change. And of course, the client's unconscious mind will pick up, it will be really, really easy for you to make this change. And hear that primarily over and above when I say I don't want you to think that. And by telling the client then what not to do, we can tell the client what to do. Erickson used to say to the client, I don't want you to go into a trance just yet, because I need to have a discussion with your conscious mind. And I want to make sure your conscious mind is here. I don't want to be talking directly to your unconscious mind just yet. So we would tell the client what not to do. Or you could be talking to a salesperson, and you could be doing be doing business consulting, and you could be saying to this salesperson, I don't want you to think that you can maintain your positive attitude all the time, even in the face of very strenuous objections to purchasing your product. I don't want you to think that every single time you go out there, you'll feel totally happy. But I do want you to notice that you can feel better and better each time you go out. Now, essentially, that's also pacing the client's behavior. It's pacing his belief system. And then it's utilizing his negative beliefs to begin to shift him into a more positive belief. So number 20 is also a real important prime directive, because it allows us to utilize the way the unconscious mind already thinks in the process of being able to make change. So those are the prime directives of the unconscious mind. And we've covered the prime directives of the unconscious mind today, as well as the presuppositions of NLP. And both of those together serve as a really solid basis of believing. I think if you were to adopt those beliefs, you'd probably find that you had really, really top flight results with your clients. So if you need to, you can certainly go back and review those at any time, but simply you could read them on pages, 12, 13, and 14 again if you needed to. This is the end of program number 3, and before you proceed, I'd like to ask you to go ahead in the back of the notebook, and if you would, just go ahead and read pages 99 through 110 in the back of the notebook. That's in the reading section, which is right in the back of your notebook. This is the end of our 3rd program. Please join us for number 4, which follows next.